Get in on the action this season with Underdog Fantasy's Pick'em game. Select higher or lower between 2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Go to Bolt Fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, we're here, dude. We got one more preseason game before regular season is right there in front of us, man. I'm so excited, dudes. On one hand, football keeps me young because the offseason is so long. It feels like forever since we saw the Chargers last play in a regular season game. On the other hand, they take years off my life because, of course, being a Chargers fan, we all know the repercussions of that fourth quarter. Well, the Bolts are taking on the Dallas Cowboys this week in our final preseason game of the year, and there's a lot going down in this one, man. Chargers got a whole lot of new in 2024, right? New head coach, new coordinators, new culture, new team. Lots of new players on this squad, and a lot of them, a good number of them, are going to be fighting for a roster spot on Saturday. This is the last shot. This is the final opportunity for a lot of these guys to make any NFL roster, and it's a big deal. It is a big deal for these dudes, and we wish everybody luck. We wish everybody good health. We wish everybody, success in their endeavors there, but it's a big, big deal for Chargers fans that are looking for this team to become the best possible version of themselves for 2024 and beyond. And there's going to be a good number of things to look at in this game that could be deciding factors in those decisions. Now, let's get into it, man. Before we do, though, hit us up. I should say, let's hit up the sponsor real quick, right? With a shout out here, man. Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $1,000. That's right, $1,000. Absolutely insane. Thank you, Underdog, for hooking us up there, man. Newcomers, definitely check out the special on screen. It's a free pick. It's a free pick, which is definitely pretty awesome for you guys that want to jump in. I would say, honestly, if you guys are wanting to try out, daily fantasy and all that kind of stuff, please do so in the preseason. That's a great place to get some practice in, and some small bananas before the actual season comes up, and it makes football that much more exciting on Sundays. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
Your Chargers at Cowboys, final game preview of the preseason, man. Super exciting stuff. Lots of stuff to kind of go over here, but more so things to look for as a fan of the Chargers that are hoping to see the 53-man roster swing one way or another. I think I'm pretty excited for whatever Jim Harbaugh and the team decide to go with this year because, honestly, this is a team that when we went through what we went through at the end of last season, be it the horrible, horrible conclusion of the Brandon Staley era, it left a lot of scars, it left a lot of uncertainty, and it left a lot of, bit of PTSD for me as a Chargers fan. We've been through the ringer over the years, but that coaching cycle was just absolutely awful. That era was one of the worst I can remember as a Chargers fan. And to go from that to Jim Harbaugh really was a bit of whiplash for me. I was like, okay, let's do this. We got ourselves one of the most prestigious names in football history. Let's see what the Chargers can do as far as one of the most epic turnarounds in a long time. And at that point, I started putting a lot of faith in what Jim Harbaugh is and what he does and what he has continued to do over and over and over and over again throughout his career. So ultimately, before starting the last preseason look at, because we're going to see a lot of final opportunities here for these guys to make the roster, and there's probably going to be some surprises, around the corner, especially with cut week coming up next week. Trust the process. Trust the process. Trust that Jim Harbaugh, the legend, knows what he's doing. Trust that the Chargers' new regime, in terms of GM and culture and all this, that they understand what they're trying to accomplish, and understand that even if things don't go the way that we expect, I feel way more confident, at least I hope everybody does, that the team is heading in the right direction despite all of our reservations. All right? So with that being said, let's jump into our first topic here called the starters. Now, week 3, I guess now. It used to be week 4. Week 3 tends to be the week in preseason that you see a lot of teams roll out with their starters. This is kind of, get those legs loose a little bit, get in football shape, get ready to hit the pace, hit the ground running of a regular season football game just a couple of weeks later, right? So that opportunity is taken by a lot of teams in the NFL. The Chargers, we were kind of waiting to see if they were going to roll out with, maybe their starters for one quarter. Some teams go as far as one half. It sounds like that's probably not going to be the case here. Now, of course, Justin Herbert, who was just fresh off of, shedding a boot from a minor injury in camp, was never likely to come back and play this preseason game at all, which I think is to the preference of all Chargers fans. Although he is doing awesome. I don't know if you guys heard his camp last week. Daniel Popper called it one of the best practices that he's ever seen for Justin Herbert. He was lighting it on fire, multiple touchdowns, just absolutely out there killing it. This week, okay? But outside of that, the Chargers, a lot of starters that you would maybe expect to see out there. We saw a little bit of Ladd McConkey last week. We could see him. Maybe one or both of the running backs get a couple of licks in there. As far as the defense is concerned, maybe one of the edge guys could get the wheels turning a little bit like a Khalil Mack. At this point, it feels like we're not going to see a good number of the starters for a couple of different reasons. One, health, maybe, yeah. Everyone's sort of working through something like Jim Harbaugh has been mentioning, right? Joey Bosa coming back and working in practice. Really, really good news for Chargers fans. I don't know if we've really been following it that closely because everybody's going out with trainers and back and forth. It's just kind of a new process of how the Chargers keep their players healthy under Ben Herbert. And Justin Herbert, of course, coming back. Like, it feels like they're really trying to put a huge emphasis on health and on preserving that health for their starters in the season, while also providing an opportunity for a lot of the underbelly of the roster to try and make the 53 before it's too late. Because, again, we're going to start seeing some crazy cuts as soon as next week, and that's going to open up some opportunities. Now, Jim Harbaugh himself did say that about 15 starters on offense and defense will not play, which is definitely a big chunk of the roster there. So who can we expect, right? Who are the guys that we're going to hope to see out there? Well, for one, the big question, which we're going to answer right now, that we're going to hear a lot about, of course, with Justin Herbert not playing, who's going to be the quarterback? Is Luis Perez going to get the start? At this point, it sounds like it's going to be Easton Stick, and this is from the mouth of our head coach, Jim Harbaugh. He's expecting Easton Stick to go out there and play the entirety of the Week 3 preseason game, and he listed Luis Perez as the backup in case something, what did he say? In case Easton's chin strap were to snap off or whatever. He listed Luis Perez as the strict backup. It's going to be Easton Stick for the entire 4 quarters on Saturday. A lot of Chargers fans are probably not going to be super excited to see that or hear that because Easton Stick has not been great this preseason. He has been statistically one of, if not the worst quarterback in the preseason, and we're really hoping that he can put it together for this last game though, man, because I've mentioned this several times in the past couple of weeks. In my spectating of Easton Stick and in my observation of what the second and third and fourth stringers look like, having a quarterback that's performing this poorly in the preseason not only hurts him, but obviously the players surround him on offense, right? The receivers aren't really getting the looks that we're hoping to see in order to evaluate them. The running backs not really seeing, the momentum that they would need to find success via the quarterback. And it really does paint a bit of a worrisome picture to what the Chargers' experience could be on Saturday. we kind of know what to expect at that point. But hey, who knows, man? Maybe Easton turns it around. Maybe we do see a good chunk of the offense out there. So long as we get a good look at it. I don't really care about the score so much as I hope that we get a good sample size. So I really do hope for the sake of that Easton Stick does find some momentum on Sunday. And he can keep the offense on the field more often than not. All right. Now, one of the guys that we just mentioned that are definitely going to be needing some extra time out there is going to be the receivers. And this is probably going to be the most worrisome position I have because of the Easton Stick start. Wide receiver is going to be very tricky for the Chargers this season to get right. Okay, I would say more specifically in terms of the depth. The starters I feel pretty good about. I think Ladd McConkey ends up edging the wide receiver 1 position. Josh Palmer is going to be excellent. And then at wide receiver 3, It really feels like Quentin Johnston is turning a corner again. We said this last season. We're still in wait and see mode, but some of the stuff I've been seeing lately has been bonkers. He looks way better than last season. His hands are starting to really, improve. We're seeing proof of that in preseason and in training camp more often than not. He's coming down with the football, using those mitts. We're seeing the route running, the separation. A lot of things about Quentin Johnston's game from last season really does feel like it is improving. And that and DJ Chark really do make me feel like wide receiver 3 should be pretty safe. Outside of that, you got Darius Davis, the returner. He'll make the roster. What about dudes like Brendan Rice, right, who I got to see in person? He was absolutely fantastic at camp. Haven't really seen much of him in the preseason, right? I want to see more opportunities for him. Simi Fehoko. This could be the game for him, right? Because I feel like he might even be in the lead right now in terms of chances of making the roster. Who's wide receiver 5 or 6 at that point, right? It feels like Fehoko at this point, which by all means is not a bad thing. Dude is awesome. Great special teamer. Awesome blocker, awesome speed and stature guy. Like, he could end up being wide receiver 6. And so for the sake of those guys, I would really hope to see the Chargers quarterback play find some consistency and find some footing that gives us a really good sample size of that position group, because again, there's a lot of guys fighting for spots. There's a lot of potential in pretty much all of these dudes. And if Easton Stick can get it together, for I don't know, 50, 60% of those drives, maybe we'll have a clearer answer of who should be wide receiver 5 or 6 at the conclusion of week 3 of preseason. And maybe the Chargers even decide to roster 7. Who knows? Next up, talking a little bit about the running backs too. Now, it'll be very interesting to see what happens this week. Kamani Vidal got his first action in preseason last week, and he was awesome. He unlocked big parts of this offense that we did not see the week previous, because Vidal is just such a good system fit for that offense. Okay? This could be a pretty big move, though, for the Chargers in terms of running back this week. Like, what's going to happen in terms of the backups? Because right now, I'll tell you, again, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, those are your locked-in starting 2, right? At 3 right now, it feels like to me it's Kamani Vidal, and I think that he could solidify that in this preseason game. But at 4, I think at the top of the preseason, a lot of us were expecting it to be Isaiah Spiller, right? At this point, I don't know if it is. It feels like it's Jarrett Patterson, right? And he could see himself some opportunities to solidify that spot for himself. Isaiah Spiller has some special teams and maybe pass catching upside that could, wedge out or edge out a spot for him too. But between him and Elijah Dotson and Jarrett Patterson, it'll be interesting who makes the roster at RB4. And it feels like you're going to see plenty of opportunity this week. I would expect to see Kamani Vidal back out there if he is healthy, and then a good portion of Jarrett Patterson as well, who's been a pretty nice bright spot there. So we'll see how that shapes out. As for the guys blocking for our running backs, I'm actually kind of excited to see how this all shakes out. We got ourselves a battle at fullback that none of us expected at the top of preseason. You tell me at the top of preseason, director, who's our fullback in 2024? I would have said Ben Mason without skipping a beat, right? That dude, he looked like he was going to be the next guy. However, the Chargers decided to pivot. I don't know if it's because of Ben Mason's talent or injury or whatever. The Chargers are doing something crazy at fullback. You guys know it. I've been posting a lot about it. I've been doing a lot of stuff on videos about it. Jordan McFadden, the guard, might end up being the Chargers starting fullback this season. And don't let his size fool you. This dude is ridiculously fast for his size. And he did look really good at fullback at the times that we saw him. At least I saw him in person a lot too at training camp. He looks like he was out there killing it and having a lot of fun playing the position. I do think he could end up being Chargers FB1, which is pretty awesome. Outside of that, we do have another guy or a couple other guys that could be competing. Who knows if Will Dissly steps in there? I doubt it. I do think the other guy to really consider at this point is going to be Tucker Fisk, the new big tight end signing from the Chargers like a week ago. He looked really good in his first preseason game. Fullback is going to be important. And the biggest reason why it's getting its own segment in this video is because we're a Greg Roman offense now, right? You're going to see a fullback on the field. And the guys competing for him are actually kind of exciting, and those should be a fun watch for Chargers fans on Saturday. So pay attention. Pay attention to whoever's lining up at fullback and how often those packages are used for the Chargers in their run game. All right. Now, speaking of the tight ends and Tucker Fisk and those guys, this position is shaking up to be a pretty intense battle. And it's one that I think I kind of expected at the top of the offseason. It really is kind of churning a little bit more than I even expected at this point. It's because tight end, of course, is going to be a pretty important position for, again, a Jim Harbaugh team, a Greg Roman offense. You're going to see a good number of them out there on the field at all times, and these guys need to have the chops to perform in that kind of offense. Now, on one side, you got, first off, the newbies, right? Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly, who are two pretty good representations of the two kinds of tight ends that we want. Hayden Hurst, the receiver, Will Dissly, the blocker, right? It kind of feels like there's a line in the sand. Of course, each can do, a little bit of both, but those are going to be the strengths in the receiving and the blocking. The Chargers are going to kind of have to look for that balance and that chemistry. Behind those two starters, you got a lot of guys that are going to be fighting for a spot. You got Donald Parham, one of the best red zone receivers you're going to find in the league, and a crazy frame and speed combo that's very, uncommon in the NFL. You got Tucker Fisk, who right now looks like a great blocker. I don't know what he looks like as far as a receiver, but he looks like he could end up being a very nice blocker for the team and maybe a fullback option for the Chargers. You got a newly signed tight end from BYU, Isaac Rex, who I think had a little stint with the Detroit Lions as well. He was Zach Wilson's target in BYU in that time, and he was awesome. He hasn't really found his footing in the NFL yet, but he could be another guy fighting for a spot in the Chargers as a receiving tight end. Then you got guys like Zach Hines, Luke Benson, Stone Smart. All of these guys are going to be thrown into the equation as possible options for the Chargers to exercise the tight end position depth, because the depth is going to be important this season. I would be kind of shocked if we didn't roster a good number of tight ends this season. Of course, you got the starting two, you got Donald Parham, but we may see, again, I would expect maybe a guy like Zach Hines and Tucker Fisk. Who knows how many we keep on the roster? I'd say at least four, because it's going to be a position that we lean a lot on, and we need guys on the roster that can perform in this offense the way that Greg Roman wants. Okay, and you're going to see a lot of guys out there. Again, they're still bringing in competition for tight end. Isaac Rex could end up being an awesome player to watch. I don't even know what his number is yet. It's such a new signing. But that position is certainly one to watch in this last game. And then finally on offense, the offensive line needs to show me a little bit of consistency from last week. And what I mean by that is week 1 sucked. Week 1 offensive line play was Garbo. And it made me very nervous about the backup offensive lineman outside of course, the guy they're seeing on screen here in Joe Alt. I want to see one more awesome showing by Joe Alt to really help us as Chargers fans feel confident in our first round pick, which right now I feel very confident. Almost everybody will tell you with the Chargers got a slam dunk. Like he's going to be an awesome pick for the Chargers' future. He will be. But what about the backups? The backups have not been performing to par for me. They really haven't. At least especially in the first game. Alex Leatherwood's been a disaster. Foster Sorrell's not been so great. Brendan Hymus has not been so great. I would love to see a game where, hey, it kind of starts to click, right? Maybe it took a couple of games to get their footing and a couple of different practices in between to correct some stuff. Maybe at this point we see the offensive line really gel into what Jim Harbaugh has envisioned. But this is such a big deal, dudes. Not just because we want to be prepared in case of injury, which again, knock on wood, but because that depth is going to be as important in terms of rotation, in terms of, just covering your bases in an offense that's really going to be leaning in on this position. The Chargers offense and defense are really going to be leaning in on a couple of positions on each side. On the offense, it's Justin Herbert, and in my opinion, the offensive line. Outside of that, you got complement pieces. Running back is going to be pretty important. Tight end's going to be pretty important. But those two positions reign king. Okay, and I need to see the offensive line feel good, not just in terms of the starters, which the starters to me feel great, but the depth needs to make me feel a little bit more confident as well. Now, of those two positions on offense that we mentioned, offensive line and quarterback feels very important. Well, what about the defense? The defense has two positions as well that I feel are extremely important to the success of this team. And of course, the biggest one is going to be edge. Edge needs to show out again. Now, I think there's a good shot that we see Thule out there. And Thule, I'm not even a little bit worried about, right? I think all of us are very excited to see him. The backups, though, I mean, Bud Dupree and Morris Brash and those guys, I just need to see the same level of consistency that we've seen the past couple of weeks. Sure, last week, maybe a little bit of dip in production, but I do still think that they were very involved in that game. This week, though, I need to see it at once, just one more time, right? Because that's going to be a position that the defense, it anchors everything, right? It's the cornerstone of everything. That pressure, that heat, it creates a ripple effect between all levels of the field for the Chargers defense. Defensive line, linebacker, defensive back. All of them are going to benefit from that particular unit overperforming. And so far, I felt like they have been overperforming, and I need to see that continuation in this game. All right. The other position, which funny enough, we'll have to actually skip over one real quick, that I think is going to end up being a huge determining factor of success is going to be linebacker for this team, which is really funny because, you would expect the Chargers defensive backs, which has been a strength for a while, in Chargers pass, or at least with some of the players back there, like right now, Asante Samuel, Derwin James, and in the past, like Casey Hayward. This year, I think it might be the linebacker. If the Chargers' two positions in offense, again, are offensive line and quarterback, I think on defense, at least to me, it feels like edge and linebacker, which in the past would have been in the same position, but you know what I mean. We got the edge guys and we got the inside linebackers at this point. Now, are we going to see our first outing for Junior Colson? We might. He hasn't seen any action in preseason. It might be a good idea to get him out there in this environment and see how he does. Of course, he's just now returning from appendicitis surgery, so we want to make sure he's healthy, number one. But number two, I mean, it might not be a bad idea to see how he does out there. But the Chargers, if you guys pay attention to the last couple of games in terms of the preseason, the linebackers have been a pretty big deal to this defense, right? They've been involved in pressure. The first preseason game that we saw, those linebackers were getting in for heat a lot, dudes. They were involved in those blitz packages very heavily. In the second game, they were involved very heavily in coverage, and in which Dan Henley and even Denzel Perryman were shining in that week. It feels like they really are the jack of all trades of this defense, and the Chargers and Jesse Minter are trying their best at keeping them a centerpiece of the defense, alongside the edge position. So I don't know. I feel pretty good about the edge position or the linebacker position. It's not something that I had a whole lot of confidence in to start the offseason with. But all of a sudden, man, if the backups are looking this good, I cannot wait to see what Junior Colson and these guys start doing with a little bit more time out there. So I'll be looking to see if 25's on the field. It would be cool. I think it would be a good idea if he's healthy to get him at least, a couple of drives in there. But outside of that, man, let's see how involved that position is, because it's been awesome to see just how much impact inside linebacker has had these past couple of weeks. Okay, now to go back here, defensive back is going to be another competition that I'm going to be closely paying attention to, because there are some guys on here that have really surprised me this offseason. Now on screen, we got Jasir Taylor, who I already was kind of pretty good on, right? I think I was like, okay, we got ourselves a decent nickel. He's been great. And he's really, tamed a lot of anxiety from me as a Chargers fan as to like, oh my God, where's the roster in terms of the starters at corner? Like, Jasir actually feels pretty good, and I feel pretty confident in him. His backups, though, Tareeb still looks insanely good. We got AJ Finley out there at backup safety. He's been looking pretty good, right? Tony Jefferson's been awesome. JT Woods, who's been getting a lot of looks at switching to cornerback, has actually started to look pretty cool too. That's something I love that the Chargers regime is doing now that they haven't done in the past. This guy's not really fitting here. He's underperforming. Maybe he's falling behind in terms of competition at safety. What about at corner? He's got the speed. He's got the frame, right? There's some potential there. Let's see what's going on. And he's gotten a pretty extended look at that position, And then you got guys like Cam Hart, right? Dean Leonard, who's been looking fantastic on the outside. Christian Fulton, who's been looking like a completely reinvented version of himself. DB, I went from super unsure about the position to borderline panicky about the position, now to pretty confident that we got something all right out here. Maybe not elite, maybe not great, but I would say good. I would say the Chargers DBs at this point feel good, and that's not something I was expecting to say. So I would hope to see something that continues that confidence in me in this game. All right. Finally, defensive line. This will be a big one. Defensive line week 1, poo-poo, did not look great. Week 2 didn't look too terrible, right? Tito's not doing bad in there. Then you got newcomer Tier Tart looking crazy good as the Chargers maybe defensive tackle 1, which is insane. We may have signed our DT1 a couple of weeks before kickoff, and he's going to be a huge impact player. I have a huge feeling about that. Scott Matlock, we've heard a lot about this offseason, right? Budget Max Crosby. He's been looking like he's stepping up. I don't know, man, but it's going to be important. And it's a position that, once again, is being elevated up because of the success of the edge. But it's one that, again, we have to pay attention to in terms of run defense especially. If the Chargers have figured something else out there, then I will feel a lot better about it, because we've had a huge weakness the past couple of seasons, and it's been that soft, squishy middle of the defensive line that teams have been running all over the past couple of seasons. If we find a way to kind of help that position out a little bit, then I feel a lot better about our chances to not have that Achilles heel that we've had for so many years. All right? So all in all, Chargers, week 3 and final week of preseason. It's going to be pretty fun to watch. Competitors welcome is going to be something that you hear a lot. The competition for the best player at that position, the best players to make the roster, is something you're going to hear a lot. Jim Harbaugh is very much so a believer in that. And it'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out, because remember, again, next week, is it Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday. Cut week. That's when we're going to see a lot of cuts. First wave of cuts, and it's going to be a big deal to see what the Chargers decide to do. There's going to be some shocking ones. There's going to be some confusing ones. But a lot of it hinges on what happens on Saturday, which is why it's a big deal for the Chargers 53 as to how they perform in their final preseason game. And also keep in mind, as a light side note, it's not just, cut day for the Chargers. It is for the rest of the 31 teams in the NFL as well. And you may see an opportunity for the Chargers to go out there and get active once again in their signings. Joe Ortiz has done an awesome job his first year as GM. We've seen so much movement in preseason that I've not seen or expected to see as a Chargers fan in a long time. And I would say, especially because of the Chargers' backup quarterback situation, that we do see a signing or two at QB at the very minimum, right? After cut day has concluded. So to round things out, what do I think the score is going to be? I think, honestly, the Chargers probably lose this one. Chargers 13 to Cowboys 21, which, again, is fine. But the 13 and that score is actually, would it be the best of the preseason, right? It was 3 and then 9 and then now I think 13, right? Am I being wrong there? I hope I'm not. But that to me signifies that the defense, or I should say the offense, had enough time on the field for me to say, hey, okay, these are the guys that we're looking at, yada, yada, yada. Hopefully we get that opportunity, especially for the receivers, okay? And again, don't worry too much about the score. It's more about finding an opportunity for all these guys to shine through and make the 53. We want the best players on our roster, and this is the time to really look at that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Let's go, baby! I need to see some Brendan Rice this week, man. I think that's one of the players I'm excited to watch on Saturday.